Someone You Should Know. A program about people you know and even more that you don't. Hosted by Stuart Sachs, veteran, husband, father, and grandfather. Now, here's your host, Stuart Sachs.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Someone You Should Know. Glad to have you with us again from wherever you are. I hope you are safe and well and stay that way. Very, very happy to have a good friend that I met through the Alan McKinney NetWeavers. I have Steve Reed on the show with me this morning. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning, Stuart. How are you today?
Great to have you with me. I have often had people on my show that are one, maybe two, three-dimensional, but you have about as many dimensions as a diamond has facets. You're involved in all kinds of things.
So, Stuart, are you saying that I could compete with the fifth dimension?
I think what I'm saying is that you do a lot of nothing and a little bit of everything.
I've heard that said before.
Do you ever get the feeling that when people call your number, you're not exactly which voice to use when you answer?
Totally.
Well, yeah, I want you to share with the audience, and we'll start to delve into some of the various things that you do. But I want you to share with the audience what you do and when you started doing it.
Oh, gosh. Well, what I do is I am a life and marriage coach. I'm a Ziglar Choose to Win coach. And I'll explain more about what that means in a moment. But my undergraduate degree, Stuart, is in psychology. I had psychology, sociology, history, and music as my background. And shortly after getting out of college back in the 70s, can't believe it's almost 50 years ago. Anyway, but shortly after graduating, I really started to delve into behavioral issues with people. Now, I wasn't stalking people or anything of that sort, but I'm just observing people. And I started doing a lot of personal development, but also learning about people skills and why people do different things. In the late 80s, I was introduced to the whole concept of personality temperaments. And I started using what's known as the Greek temperaments. And it was the cholerics, the sanguines, phlegmatics, and melancholies. And my challenge with that was I couldn't spell the words. So I was looking for other options. And I found the DISC program, D-I-S-C, and I can spell DISC. But when you look at the two different types, they're essentially the same thing. A D being somebody that's very, very demanding. They're the leaders, the chargers. That's about 10% of the population. The I in the whole scheme is the inspirational person. They're the ones that they're the life of the party. And if there's no party happening, they will create a party. Then you have the S that's very steady, very stable. They're the back office people. They're the ones that they don't want to be out front. They would rather be the support person that helps the other people be out front.
Right.
And then you have the C, which their dominant character traits are things like they're very calculating, very cautious in the things that they do. Imagine if you're dealing with a dentist and he's getting ready to drill for a filling. You want somebody that's a high C personality type because they measure twice and cut once, from the carpenter's term. You do not want somebody that's a high I personality because they don't really care. They're just having fun. And they may say, ooh, that's going to hurt in the morning. I'm so sorry. And they don't care. So I started coaching people as I was learning about that. And that led into me actually doing some life coaching for some people. And they're saying, well, I understand that personality stuff, but I need help in this area. And then that morphed into couples coaching or marriage coaching, because one of them is saying, well, he does this, and she's saying, well, he does that. And so I have to become an arbitrator or an arbiter for that sort of thing, or a mediator. And the whole goal was to help them have a more fluid and prosperous life together as a couple. And so then about 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago, I went through a program. It was a life enrichment program that morphed my coaching into more dealing with people and the core problems that they deal with. And I've dealt with virtually everything you can imagine, whether it was somebody that was raped or molested or physically abused, verbally abused. It could be something as simple to a lot of people where a parent says, "You are so stupid. Why don't you act like your brother?" Or that you'll never amount to anything. Or, if you don't act right, you're going to end up just like your brother Jesse in prison. Those kinds of things. And I started dealing with that emotional damage with people. And so my practice morphed about 12 years ago into really getting into what the core is, what's causing people to do things. And along the way, back in 1981, I heard Mr. Zig Ziglar speak for the first time. First time I heard him, he'd already been speaking for many years. And I fell in love with his mindset and the things that he was doing. And I started using a lot of his material and coaching style as I'm working with a client. And then about a year and a half ago, I've been friends now with Mr. Ziglar's son, Tom, for about 5 or 6 years. And because of that relationship and the coaching relationship, I was asked to be one of the first Ziglar Choose to Win coaches. And the coaching is all based around Tom's book, Choose to Win. And so that's where we are today. I love helping people get past the roadblocks and the speed bumps and the glass ceilings and whatever it is that's holding them back from being peak performers. My tagline these days is, I'm bringing light and hope for a more victorious life. That pretty much sums up what I do.
Now, you mentioned a couple things that I want to get a little bit more specific on.
Sure.
Number one, you are a marriage coach.
Yes.
And, I go back several decades myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that the concept of two people falling in love and getting married back in the 60s and the 70s has a much different outlook and meaning than what it does now in 2020.
Yes.
And I know that there seems to be a little bit more of a growing concern with young couples going through some marriage preparation. I don't want to necessarily call it counseling, but going through marriage preparation prior to wedding day, so that that it's not all just kisses and holding hands, that there's a commitment and a lot that goes into it. Are you finding that more young people are reaching out for that type of direction prior to getting married?
Sadly, no. I did some research about a year ago on the cost of a wedding, and the cost, when you factor in everything, whether it's the wedding venue, the music, the flowers, the cakes, all of the different things, the bridal gowns and so forth, everything added up, the average in America was right at $34,000.
I was gonna guess 30,000, and also I was pretty close.
So here's the funny thing. I'm looking through this list of all the different expenses, and no place in there was anything about pre-marriage coaching or counseling. Nowhere. So that really got me thinking that couples, and unfortunately sometimes the parents of the couples, are so focused on a day that they don't consider that it's going to be a long-term commitment.
Well, exactly. They got the prenuptial dinner that usually the night before for all the out of town people that come in. You usually have after the wedding, and when the bride and groom go off on there, you have a breakfast the next morning before everybody leaves, and you have so much preparation, and like you said, dollars that are invested around basically about a 20-minute ceremony.
Yeah.
And what surprises me in what you do is, why are there not more clergy that are involved in either a requirement or a heavy suggestion that the bride and groom go through some type of a prep course with the clergyman that is marrying them, and make that part of the package too.
Well, that's one of the things that I do.
Yeah.
Is when I'm marrying somebody, and I'm recently licensed and ordained. It's kind of funny you bring that up. Over the past several years, I've had several people that have said, "We want you to coach us, but we want you to marry us also." And I couldn't do it. So I went to the leadership of my church and told them what I was looking for. And I was one of the first people that they've ever had. Now, the church has been around for a long time. And so I'm the first lay person that they have actually licensed or ordained to do this. But I'm putting together a package that is not just the ceremony, but there's a minimum of a 4 to 6 week program that I'm taking them through. We start with an assessment, and the assessment covers 10 different areas of their lives together. And it's things like communication, it's things like conflict resolution and finances. And where does family fit into this whole picture? Where do friends fit into this whole picture? And a lot of couples don't take the time to think about those aspects. They just assume, well, we're in love, so everybody's going to love us together, but they don't.
It's kind of an I know it all attitude.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and then you turn around and then you realize that basically the divorce rate among first marriages is about 50%. Or maybe more.
Yeah.
And so
atrocious.
That's the mindset with young people today is, maybe if they were given the question, would you invest 6 weeks of a little bit of counseling in order to make the marriage that you're entering into more substantial and more solid, and give it a better chance that it's going to last for 50 years or more?
Stuart, you know what the problem is with a lot of marriages today, a lot of relationships today in general. I'm going to use a plastic bottle as an example. This is disposable. Marriages today oftentimes are disposable. Instead, this is refillable. And marriages, too many couples, and it's not just young couples, it's the 40s, 50s, and 60-year-olds that they're going through a second or a third marriage, and they think, well, the first one didn't work out, so I'll try this one. And as a result, they go in with the wrong mindset that this is going to last forever. Instead, they're just saying, well, if it doesn't work out, then we'll get rid of that one and go on to the next one.
Yeah, and I think far too often we the current generation just kind of accepts the fact that, well, if it doesn't work out, that's okay. We'll just go on and move on to the next step. It's become too acceptable to have a bad marriage and go through a divorce.
Yeah, well, it's become too easy to go through the divorce.
Yeah. Now, just to switch gears just a little bit, we're talking about working with people directly, one-on-one with issues.
Right.
What you do as a life coach, number one, how does that differ from what a psychologist and all would do?
Well,
I mean, you're dealing in more of the practical?
Yeah.
Rather than the scientific.
Yeah, down and dirty. Okay, what's causing you to do X, Y, and Z, those kinds of things. I look a lot for those triggers. And there are people that call them whispers. And it's those little voices that we have going off in the back of our mind that sometimes it tells us X and we don't want to do X. We really want to do Y. And I'll give you a case in point. I was talking with somebody not too long ago, not a client, just a friend, and she lost her mother back in December last year. And she was telling me that when she goes through this particular intersection here in the McKinney area, that is the intersection where she got the phone call where her mother passed away. So that became a trigger for her. And we don't realize the number of triggers that we have that are causing us to do different things. So what I do is I try to figure out what those triggers are with the people. And I had a client many years ago, and by the way, I don't divulge any names and specifics, and I'm going to uh, stretch or change the scenarios a little bit. So I want to maintain client privilege and privacy. But I'm going to call this particular client Hank. And Hank was having some personal issues. He was married, he had 3 children, and Hank could not handle anyone touching him at all. And I found that kind of odd that he would have 3 children and he couldn't handle people touching him. But he was a police officer in the area. And as we're working together, we start peeling back the layers to figure out exactly what happened when he was 5 years old. Now, when I was working with him, he was 35. So 30 years earlier, his mother disciplined him in a way that totally changed his mindset to the point where he couldn't handle anybody touching him. And as a result, now, it wasn't it was abuse, but it wasn't a physical abuse, so to speak, okay? It just rewired his brain to what was acceptable behavior and what was not. So when we discovered exactly what it was, I was able to take him through a process to get rid of that trigger. And his wife called me up several days after we had been working together, and she started asking me some questions. I said, well, you do realize that I can't tell you anything about my relationship and what he shared with me. She said, no. This is totally different. Said, okay, fine. So she asked me the question. I said, I don't know the answer, but here's somebody that can give you the answer. And she says, well, do you have just a brief moment? I said, yeah, sure. What's going on? She says, well, I just want to tell you that you saved my marriage. I'm like, okay, help me with that. She says, well, when we first started coming to you, and somebody else was coaching her at the time, I was coaching him. She says, our marriage was literally a phone call away from divorce. I said, okay, what do you mean? She says, well, we were getting ready. If your stuff didn't work, we were going to be calling a divorce attorney. I said, okay, so on a scale of 1 to 10, where were you back then? And she says, oh, at best, we were a 1. I said, okay, so bear with me. My phone is ringing. So, okay. Anyway, so in the process, she said her marriage was about a 1 at best. I said, well, where are you today? She says, well, we're between a 6 and a 7 today. And that was now it was about 40 hours of coaching that we went through. It was some really intense stuff. And because of him dealing with that issue from 30 years before, we were able to peel the layers back to reveal what it was, deal with it, so that was no longer an issue. That had become a trigger to him. So if his wife did something, that triggered that emotion from 30 years earlier.
Yeah, and that in itself, I think, is where you get the difference between the definition of a therapist and a coach. That coach, it becomes a little bit more of like that family member that is willing to talk it through and help you, whereas the therapist is more of the medical community. And I think that more people need to understand that and recognize that. And certainly, now that we're in the middle of this pandemic that's been going on for almost 6 months now, people are spending a little bit more time inside, not getting out into the public as much. So the tension level is rising. And, it's a matter of saying, it's not wrong to seek out a coach to get you through this emotional time of stress and all. Because maybe what you need to do is, instead of just talking to your spouse and bouncing the same things back and forth, share it with a third party that can help find a new direction for you.
And Stuart, that is so true, because oftentimes the coach can discover or reveal some things that the couple can't see because they have blinders on, because this is the way I look at things. And a coach sometimes come in from comes in from a different viewpoint and says, "What about this?" And all of a sudden, the couple is like, "Oh my gosh, I hadn't even thought about that." And those kinds of things happen. I have those kinds of things happen a lot. And when I'm sharing with a brand new client, I tell them there are basically 4 different areas where I draw from. Number one is my background in psychology and continuing education that I've done for the past 40 plus years. Number 2, and a lot of people don't understand this, and I don't understand it a lot of times, but God has given me a level of discernment that I can't understand. And I could be in the middle of a conversation with a client, and God, now he doesn't speak to me in an audible voice, but he says, "Say this." And my response is, "God, that doesn't make sense." And his response to me is always the same thing. "I'm not asking for your opinion. I'm asking for your obedience." So I say this to that client, and their response oftentimes is, "How did you know that?" And well, sometimes they understand, sometimes they don't. And so what happens is I listen to those types of things so that I can help the client get to where they need to go. The third thing is I've been a Christian now since 1972. I've spent a lot of time in the Bible. I find so much wisdom in the Bible, and oftentimes I just transfer that wisdom to that other person. And the fourth thing, I'm 64 years old and I've lived life. I have my own scars. I have my own damage that I've had to deal with. And because of some of those things from my past, I can relate to those people that are going through something similar. Whereas I wasn't going to do this, but I'm going to anyway. I've been married before. Okay, my wife Suzanne and I have been married now for 4 years. Absolutely phenomenal woman, fabulous relationship. I mean, she is a godsend to me. I was married to somebody else for almost 24 years, and we were going this way, and she started going that way, and I didn't know why. And we went through a divorce, and I couldn't figure out. We didn't have a marriage anymore. Now, I don't endorse divorce. That's not one of the things that I talk about a lot. I'd rather fix the problem as long as the two parties are willing to fix it. Well, she wasn't willing to fix the problem. And I found out years later that there was some infidelity on her part. And that was why we went through the divorce. Well, if I hadn't been through that, I couldn't relate to that couple that's dealing with the same types of things.
Exactly.
So the couple that has been married for 45 years, God bless them. I think that is fabulous. But sometimes they can't relate to the couple that's going through junk in their life right now. So I come to the table with a different level of experience than the therapist has, than the psychologist or psychiatrist has, because they got their information from a book. I got my information from real life. And
right. The University of Life.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's also is kind of that bridge that sometimes those of us that have been around the block a few times,
yep.
When we try to approach those young people and say, as you're approaching marriage and career and family and all, can I give you a little bit of advice?
Yep.
And the smart ones will say, please. Yep. The others will say, I think we got it.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Before we go any further, I do want to share with the audience that if you want to learn more about what Stephen does, StephenReedMinistries.com. Mark will probably put it up on the screen, and there will be a phone number for you so that you can give a call to Steve at any time. The one thing that I appreciate most about Steve is that he is approachable. And we've been talking a little bit about young people and marriage, but instead of two people trying to work everything out, if you can find someone with a neutral point of view that you can sit down that instantly becomes a friend and says, I will listen to you, and then I will give you some direction. And of course, you have to choose whether you're going to follow the direction or, discredit it. That's up to you. But to be able to start to talk to someone who cares about the situation, I think that's what's paramount today, and it's what's missing in our fast-paced society. We need to kind of go back and recapture that. What we're talking about here is something that Steve shares via his website, which we're scrolling through right now to give you a little bit of an idea of what he is and what he does. Steve, you're also an author. You do blogs, you do newsletters, you do personal workshops. And it's something that I want my audience to know is that if this kind of just, strikes a note with you and you say, you know what, I really maybe would like to learn more about that, to share what Steve does, not only maybe with myself personally, but maybe through my church, through my community organization, my homeowners association, be a guest to talk to people. The more that people have access to people like a life coach, like Steve Reed, I think the more opportunity they have of living a better life. I mean, is that a fair endorsement, Steve?
Thank you. I couldn't have said it better.
It's important. Now I want you to share with people, because they're looking at your website right there, and in the upper left-hand corner is a symbol that is very, very meaningful to you, and that is lighthouses. You have had this fascination with lighthouses, not only because they're beautiful, but because they have true meaning in what you do and in your life. And I want you to share that with the audience too.
Well, thank you, Stuart. One of the things with lighthouses, I've been collecting different lighthouses for probably 35 to 40 years. At one point in time, my collection had close to 100 different lighthouses.
Wow.
And now when I say different lighthouses, what I mean by that is I have plates that are lighthouses. I have coffee mugs that are lighthouses. I have wall hangings. I have beautiful prints that are lighthouses. I've got tablecloths, dishes that are lighthouses. I've got, pardon me as I turn my back, I've got figurines and other shelf type lighthouses of all different kinds, all different sizes. And what happened was, probably about 30 years ago, I had people that started recognizing that I liked lighthouses, and I started getting them. And, here comes Christmas, here comes birthday, here comes whatever event, and here's another lighthouse. Oh my gosh. And so I love the lighthouse and the concept. And the symbolism for me is that a lighthouse is a guiding light for somebody. And I have to tell you, Stuart, you've probably heard this joke or this story before, but this sea captain, he's a captain of a naval ship, and he's sailing down the coastline, and he sees a light that's several miles up in front of him, and he has his seamen call out to that ship that's up ahead and says, you need to change your direction by 10 degrees to the starboard, or whatever. I don't know what they would have said, but anyway, you need to change your position. And on the phone, or on the radio coming back from him, was a voice that says, no, I'm not going to change my direction. You need to change your direction. And they go back and forth like this for a few minutes. And finally, the captain of this ship gets on the radio and says, this is Captain and so forth, and you need to change course right now. And on the other end, it says, well, this is Ensign so-and-so, and I'm in charge of the lighthouse. And unless you want to have an up close and personal relationship with me, you need to change course. So when you stop and think about it, the lighthouse is a constant. It's a steady object. It's a steady place that you can count on. As long as that light is burning, it's giving you direction on how to stay off the rocks, how to stay away from the dangerous areas. So as a life coach, what I do is I teach people how to stay away from those dangerous areas. And if they're in the rocks, how do we get out of the rocks? So I shine a light to help them get out of the rocks and all of the things that are going to cause them problems.
And just like people, the lighthouses can be different heights, different shapes,
Oh, yeah.
different locations, but the core idea of the lighthouse is the guidance aspect.
Yes.
So whether you are young, old, heavy, thin, whatever, the idea is that guidance applies to you also. It just has to be tweaked in different ways.
Exactly. And Stuart, along with what you're saying, different sizes, shapes, and so forth, I may not be the right lighthouse for somebody. I may have to refer them to a different lighthouse. But the point is, we need to shine a light on whatever is causing the problem. And if you don't shine a light on that problem, then you're going to be continuing in that problem over and over again. I had a client several years ago that, as I was coaching him, I found what his trigger was early on. And in the process of this, I happened to glance down peripheral vision, and I saw him starting to clench his fist. And I took note of that because he was bigger than I am, and it would have hurt if he had used it. So when we were completely finished, he says, you really need to be thankful that you taught me about X, Y, and Z. And I said, well, why is that? He says, because, well, I don't think you realize how close you were to finding yourself on the floor. I'm like, well, I knew exactly where I was. And I also knew that if you had done that, I would have had you arrested. And he says, yeah, that's a good point. No, it would have hurt, but so I know how to get people to the point, and I had to do it because he was being so stoic. No, I don't have any problems. Why are you talking to me about this and so forth? And it was one of those things his wife basically told him, you need to do this. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. But he got to the point where if I hadn't hit his triggers like that consistently, then he would never have broken down and revealed what the core issues were. So
interesting. Another topic.
Yes, sir.
Zig Ziglar.
Yes.
I know the name. I remember. I have to admit, I have not read the books, and I'm not as familiar with it. But you have become so familiar with it that you share it with audiences.
Yes.
And the Zig Ziglar approach is a lifestyle approach and can be adapted in a lot of different ways. What is your connection with Zig Ziglar and now his son? What does it mean to you, and how does it pump you up to share it with the public?
Well, again, my relationship with Mr. Ziglar goes back to the early 80s. I saw him at a conference, and I'm watching this guy. And I grew up in a real little town on the East Coast, and I saw this man walking across stage, kind of pacing back and forth across the stage, and then he's down on one knee, and he's up, and he's making a point. So, a very animated individual. And I fell in love with the message that he was giving. And as a result, I bought a book, and then I bought some tapes, and then I bought another book, and I bought more tapes, and now it's CDs. Now it's podcasts and so forth. And I really appreciated his mindset and what he was doing. And the fundamental mindset from Mr. Ziglar was his most famous quote. And it goes like this: you can get everything you want in life if you will just help enough other people get the things that they want. So I adopted that actually way back in the 80s, and everything that I've done in my life, I'm always looking to help other people get the things that they want. And there are times that I get paid for it. There are times that I don't get paid for it, and that's okay. But in using that philosophy, what happens is when you give, and Stuart, you know this from some of the networking things that you've been involved with, when you give to somebody, they are more likely to give back to you. So you always have to be the first or the initial giver in most cases. So what I discovered over the years, And it morphed into my coaching. As I'm giving to a client, they tend to reveal more and open up more. So sometimes, as going back to your question about the counselor or therapist side of things versus what I do, counselors and therapists don't tell about their problems. They don't tell about their life.
It's only about you.
Here's the book. I tell people, okay, here are the ways that I screwed up. Don't screw up that way, okay? If I can keep you from messing up that way, that'll help you in your life. So I am, well, I have the boundaries, but I share some personal stories about what I dealt with to help them get through their issues. And I learned that from Mr. Ziglar because he used to talk about those things about his life growing up. And he used to tell the story about the BAM method of exercise, BAAM. And when he first launched his first book, he was overweight. And he used to joke about saying that he went to the doctor, and the doctor said, well, Mr. Zig, you're not overweight, you're just under tall. And I love that. Oh, that makes total sense. So what he did was the first day he went out and he ran a block. He stopped, he turned around, he went back home. The next day he went out, he ran a block and a mailbox. That's where we get the BAM, block and a mailbox. And the next day it was block and 2 mailboxes, block and 3 mailboxes. And my relationship then, so I followed him for years. Well, about 5 years ago, I started going to his corporate office. Now, he had already passed away, but his son, Tom, had continued on with the legacy that Mr. Ziglar started over 40 years ago. Every Monday morning, they were doing what Mr. Ziglar called the Monday morning devotions. And it's a 30-minute devotion time. And he used to say it's the most important meeting of the week. You start your week off on a positive note. Well, I started going and thoroughly enjoyed it. I've had the opportunity to speak a half dozen times and share different insights with people that come. And it's people of all different walks of life. Well, along the way, I became friends with Tom. And shortly, well, I was about ready to do a re-release of my first book. And you probably can't see this, but down at the bottom here, it says forward by Tom Ziglar. So I am honored to have Tom having forwarded my first book, my half-brother. So that relationship just continued to foster. And then a year ago, when Tom was introducing his Choose to Win coaching program, I was asked to be one of the first coaches in this particular program. And so that's how the relationship has developed.
Well, I hope that those that are watching and listening and following this show realize the personality that you have. And it is not an authoritative personality. It is more of a brotherly personality. And I think that's important because what you said earlier, again, goes back to scripture. 'Tis better to give than receive.
Yes.
We also live in a society today that if you believe in that and you follow that, you have a better chance of you taking that plan and paying it forward to help someone else.
Absolutely.
And I think it's terribly important. Well, I'm going to ask you for some free advice for our listening audience.
Certainly.
Here.
Happy to.
And that is, what do you perceive, in all your many years of doing this counseling and talking to people, what do you see other than the pandemic right now? What do you perceive as some of the most important roadblocks that people seem to be encountering today?
Probably number one is fear. People are afraid. And I'm not talking just about the pandemic. They're afraid to make a choice. They're afraid to take that first step. I tell the little joke story, whatever. There are 5 bullfrogs sitting on lily pads. 3 of them decide to jump off the lily pads. How many frogs are left on the lily pads? Well, it's all 5. Because the 3 just decided, they never took action. And if we don't take action, you may have the best idea in the world, but if you don't take action, it's only an idea. So you have to take action. So what keeps people from taking those actions? It's the fears. And oftentimes it's the fear of the unknown, or it's the fear of what are people going to say? What are people going to think? What are people going to do? And as a result of that, you become paralyzed to a certain extent. You can't move forward, when sometimes you just need to take that first bold step and get out of your comfort zone to move forward. And one of my favorite books, it was written by Bruce Wilkinson. He was a professor at Dallas Seminary for years. He's got a phenomenal organization. It's called The Dream Giver. And he talks about the step-by-step process of getting to a dream. And the first step is you have to receive the vision of that dream, whatever the vision is. Then you're probably going to be in a comfort zone. So you have to realize, I got to get out of this comfort zone. And then you're going to understand that there are going to be people around you that are in your comfort zone that they're going to say, Stuart, you don't want to do this. It's not safe. I mean, Stuart, radio program, get out of here. You don't know what you're doing. Why in the world did you do that, Stuart? What they're really saying is, Stuart, you're making me feel uncomfortable because it's a stretch for me. It's not about you. It's about me. So you get out of your comfort zone. Then you get to what Dr. Wilkinson called the border bullies. And these are the people right on the edge of that comfort zone. You're getting ready to really move out. And they say, you know what? It's not safe out there. It's dangerous. And you do not know what you're going to get. So, why would it's just, don't do it. Just don't. Well, again,
right.
They're trying to keep you in their comfort zone. Then you get into the wilderness area and you're like, God, why am I here? Then you get to a place called sanctuary. And sanctuary, you get to take a rest. Where have I been? Where am I going? Those kinds of things. And this is probably one of the hardest areas, because then God says, give me your dream. Because what happens a lot of times, Stuart, is people make that dream their God instead of making God their dream. So when you release the dream back to God, you leave there, you go into an area that's called the Valley of Giants. And that's where all of the big stuff happens. And you're not getting through that giant. It's not going to happen. And somehow you get through it. You get to the other side, you get to your dream, and then the most horrible thing happens of all. You get another dream and you got to go through it all over again. But the thing is, everybody is going to go through those cycles or those phases in order to get to whatever the dream is. So in my coaching, I teach those concepts to my clients as well. Where are you today? Where are you going? What are the obstacles that you are going to have to overcome in the process? And it's a process, and that's all it is.
And wouldn't you say that in our lives it's a regular reassessment?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And viewing this concept that you're talking about. You made the reference to the five frogs on the lily pad,
Mm-hmm.
and they come up with the idea and they've got this great idea, but they never get off the lily pad.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden one day they're watching this other frog and they're saying, "Hey, wait a minute. We had that idea, except that other frog did something about it.
Exactly.
You just thought about it."
That's exactly it. And so as a result, we get stuck, and then somebody else takes our idea and they start moving on it, and then we're licking our wounds, and we come up with another idea, and we have all kinds of excuses why we can't do that one. It's that fear that holds us back. But the fear sometimes, Stuart, comes in from that parent or spouse or sibling or coach that says, Stuart, why are you even trying that? That's the dumbest thing you could ever do. You don't know what you're doing with that. I mean, that's ignorant. It's just stop. Go back to what you've been doing, okay?
Yep.
And so we stop. So we listen to those negative comments or those negative tapes that other people plant in our minds, and as a result, it becomes paralyzing to us, so we can't move forward. So we have to get rid of the fears, get rid of that paralysis to move forward. And that happens in marriages, it happens with businesses, that happens in life in general. So back to your question about what am I seeing? That's what I'm seeing. People are paralyzed. There's so much change going on in our lives today. I mean, who would have thought 6 months ago, 8 months ago, that you and I would be having this conversation via a video conference instead of being across the table from you in your studio.
Right.
I wouldn't have thought about that, although I was starting to move my coaching online, but I wouldn't have thought about what's going on. And so now today I'm coaching with people literally around the country.
And there are still people today, 6 months into this pandemic, that while we are continuing to share our message through a virtual format, there are other people that are just saying, I can't do it. I won't do it. I don't like it. I'm just going to wait until the doors open and we can sit down in the studio again. And are you helping yourself or harming yourself by following that? You
Exactly.
have to be adaptable in almost anything and everything that we do.
Exactly. You know, I think it was Henry Ford that said something, a variation of this. I'm not going to quote it exactly, but if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
And you won't know the answer unless you try.
Exactly. And you know, one of the things Mr. Ziglar used to say all the time is failure is, how do you put that? It was something like failure is an event, not a person.
Yeah.
You may fail at something.
My father used to say that failure is a stepping stone to success.
Oh, absolutely.
And you won't know what failure is unless you do it.
Yeah. Believe me, I've got enough cuts and lacerations and bruises and scars and so forth that I've had my share of failures.
Yeah.
But I keep going. I don't have a choice. I have to keep going. And that's the thing. It's the decision that you make that you are going to be consistent and persistent with the things that you're doing in order to get to whatever that dream or goal is. Here's the other thing that a lot of people are struggling with today is they don't know why they are doing the things that they are doing. They don't have a why. Their why is, I got to pay the bills. No, you need something bigger than that. My why is pretty simple. I want to help as many people as I possibly can achieve their why. And I got to tell you a real quick story. I had a client a while back that, as I'm coaching and teaching different things about using affirmations and proper mindset and the things that they're doing, and they shared an experience that they had with a neighbor where they started sharing with that neighbor about mindset and affirmations and those kinds of things. And I thought to myself, okay, this is true success for me. For me, when I can teach the student to become the teacher. And that's what I do.
That's part of that paying it forward.
Exactly.
That we were talking about too. And that comes from interaction with people. You know, we met through the Alan McKinney NetWeavers. That's exactly what the NetWeavers are all about. And that is sharing and interaction. Not only to suggest and promote each other's businesses, but also their personalities and learn who is doing what and how can I help you? Exactly. And it's not, you got to help me in return, but I like what you're saying and how can I help you?
Exactly.
And we all have to learn this sooner or later, and I hope it's sooner, that it works in your religious communities, it works in your living communities, it works in your daily dealings with other people.
Yeah, very true.
And sharing your expertise, sharing what you know, and then learning something from someone else.
Yeah. And you know, it's funny you saying that. Yeah, I've been doing marriage coaching for a long time. This past Saturday, guess what I was doing? I was in a marriage conference learning more.
Exactly.
It's all the continuing education. And always for me to be open to new possibilities, new techniques, new ideas. And you know, one of the things that I do for couples, for everybody virtually, is I have an assessment program that I take people through. And it helps me in the discovery process, but specifically in marriages, to figure out what the sticking points are. Well, I've got one assessment program that I've been using, and I've got another one that I'm getting ready to start using. So this one may be the best one, or this one may be the best one. I don't know until I talk to the client initially. but it's all about helping them figure out what their issues are, what their stumbling points are, roadblocks are, so that they can get past those things. And that's where the assessments come in as well.
Exactly. Well, Steve, folks, again, the website, the phone number is on the screen. Steve is a very, very approachable person. Be in touch with him. I want to thank you very, very much for taking the time to be on the show, to share what you do, and to let people know that you don't have to be inside all the time. Get outside and share it, and all, and it'll make you a better person. So to Steve Reed and Steve Reed Ministries, thank you very, very much. To those of you that are watching and listening, be well, be safe, make it a good weekend, and remember, be yourself, because everyone else is taken. Bye.